Welcome back, everyone, as we take a look at part 2 of the story of one of the most influential women in history, Eleanor of Aquitaine. If you didn't see part 1 of my reaction, there's a link in the description that will take you back to that, as well as the link to the original content from Extra History, so you can watch it without my commentary, or at least head over there and give them a like and leave a comment to help them out for all the work that they've done in putting this together. I'm excited to dive into part 2. Just came out a couple of days ago. Let's go ahead and see what it's all about.
1152, outside Paris. Newly divorced from her ex-husband Louis VII, King of France, Eleanor is going back home to Aquitaine. Though she has to be cautious, because as it turns out, as Duchess of her homeland, she's a prime target for a very specific type of kidnapping. It is not unknown for nobles to kidnap heiresses and forcibly marry them to gain their land, knowing that the church almost never grants a divorce once a marriage is joined.
And this is not any ordinary amount of land. This is not a countess that has a small area of territory. This is a woman who has the rights to a huge chunk of what is now France. I mean, we're talking, I don't know the exact figure, but it's got to be a quarter of all of France. I mean, it's no small thing. This is the most desired marriage in the world at this moment.
In fact, this was such a concern that the last time she was single, Louis's father had sent 500 armed men to escort her to her wedding. And now she's heard that there are 2 nobles already lying in wait to ambush her on the road. But Eleanor will slip the net, arrive safely home, and dispatch a messenger to a man she's only met once. That man is Henry, Duke of Normandy, and the letter asks him to come marry her immediately.
So, for all of you who were telling me, no, he wasn't Duke of Normandy, yes, he was Duke of Normandy. He was made Duke of Normandy in 1150 by the King of France. In 1151, he becomes Count of Anjou, which is his hereditary title. He inherits from his father, who dies. And this will be the start of the Plantagenet dynasty when he ascends to the throne of England.
Thanks so much to Factor for keeping us fed on a busy schedule. Last episode, we discussed how King Louis VII and Eleanor, Duchess of Aquitaine, successfully annulled their marriage on the grounds of consanguinity. But it does bear asking, why? Like, why would Louis let Eleanor go?
And a couple of other things to mention here. First of all, the consanguinity, the idea that they were too closely related to get married, is something that would have been known when they got married. It's not like they all of a sudden discovered this. These people knew their genealogies. They knew their descent because it was vital to their inheritance and to their claims on the titles that they had. It just became an excuse to get the annulment of the marriage. And in this case, it's an annulment, not a divorce, which means it's as if the marriage never happened, which is kind of weird, being that they still make the kids legitimate, but there was a reason behind how they did that, and basically what it was the argument was, well, the parents entered into the marriage thinking that it was a legal marriage, that it was an okay marriage. They didn't know that it would have to be annulled, and so it's not the kids' fault. The kids are still legitimate, even though we're saying the marriage never happened. But Eleanor is also related to Henry, who she's going to marry next, so the same issue exists there.
I mean, she owned much more territory than his piddly holdings around Paris. Well, from Louis's perspective, he needed a son. Unlike in Aquitaine, women in northern France could not inherit. And Eleanor, now around 30 and only having produced 2 daughters in 15 years of marriage, didn't seem to be able to bear more children. So he let Eleanor go, and his court set about finding Louis a new wife, while also crafting vicious rumors that pinned the marriage's failures on her. And sure, while Aquitaine remained Eleanor's for now, when she died, it would go to their eldest daughter, Marie. Unless, of course, Eleanor remarried and produced a male heir. But come on, I mean, who would dare displease their overlord by marrying an ex-queen of France, am I right? Oh, hey there, Henry. Didn't see you right away. Also, at the end of the last...
What they mean by overlord is, even though Henry is the heir to the English throne, he also is Duke of Normandy, which is French territory, which means it's this kind of weird thing that exists for large periods of history, where you have a guy who will be king in one country, but also have to pay homage to a king in another country for territory he rules in that country. It's kind of a fascinating thing.
Last episode, we did cheat a bit by saying Henry was the heir to the English throne, but that was advancing the timeline a little bit. Because you see, England was going through a civil war at the time, known as the Anarchy, a term which pretty much sums things up. But to put it very, very simply, Henry's grandfather had been the King of England. But when he tried to designate his daughter Matilda, Henry's mother, his heir, a succession crisis broke out, and a noble named Stephen seized the throne.
And Stephen is also, a relative. They're related to each other. They're cousins, and this is the kind of the first cousins' war here in England. And Matilda, you'll see her often referred to as Empress Matilda, and that's because she was previously, before she marries the Count of Anjou, she is married to the Holy Roman Emperor, and so she was the Holy Roman Empress, basically, consort to the Emperor, and so she kind of kept that title kind of informally afterward.
So while Henry did have claim to the throne, he wasn't exactly next in line. Heck, he and Stephen weren't even on good terms. They were fighting a low-intensity war. However, Henry was on good terms with Louis, who Henry had finally declared fealty to in exchange for formal recognition as Duke of Normandy. But as you can imagine, that relationship turned pretty frosty once Henry slipped off to Aquitaine to marry Eleanor in a hasty ceremony less than 8 weeks after the divorce. Yeah, those two worked fast. So fast, in fact, there's been speculation that they set this whole marriage plan up in advance. Adding insult to injury, Henry and Eleanor were actually more closely related than she and Louis had been, and 4 months later, Eleanor was pregnant. Yep.
Yeah, so that is brutal stuff when you think about all of that. I think it's probably fair to assume that even if nothing was formally in place, that there was at least a thought to what was coming. That she knew she had these plans in place, and there had been some talks, or at least some thinking through all of this. It didn't just materialize in 8 weeks.
Oh, that's right. 2 girls and a decade and a half of marriage with Louis, but Eleanor gets pregnant almost instantly after marrying Henry. Now that might have been for a couple of reasons. First off, Henry was 19, a decade younger than Eleanor, and, well, let's put it this way. Both of Louis's daughters with Eleanor were born after a bishop and a pope blessed the wedding bed and encouraged them to have kids, but Henry didn't really need any godly encouragement. In fact, their marriage appears to have been a genuine love match and extremely passionate.
Yeah.
Henry was considered handsome, with red gold hair and an athletic frame, and he loved to hunt, to read books, and of course, to beat the living snot out of his enemies on the battlefield.
Interesting, too, that they talk about what a passionate relationship they have, because it will not always remain that way. Let's just say that Henry and Eleanor and their sons have what could charitably called a dysfunctional family.
And Henry kept racking up the wins. The same day Eleanor gave birth to their son William, securing Aquitaine for their family, King Stephen's son, the heir apparent to the English throne, died suddenly, supposedly struck down by God while sacking a church, clearing the way for Henry to invade England, battle Stephen, and force the king to sign a treaty confirming Henry as the legitimate heir to the English throne. 11 months later, Stephen died, and Henry and Eleanor were crowned King and Queen of England. And just to hammer home how nuts this timeline is, Eleanor had gone from a royal divorce in France to the throne of England in 2.5 years. And in doing so, they joined Aquitaine, Normandy, and England, founding a continuous territory stretching from the Scottish border in the north to the Spanish border in the south.
Look at that. Look at how much territory England controls at this point. This is just a couple generations after William the Conqueror, William the Bastard as he was known, the Duke of Normandy, invades England and kind of turns the country French in a sense. And now you've got England turning France English in a sense. So I'm oversimplifying it, but you get the point. I mean, this is just the height of power for England, and it's amazing how quickly the next generation is going to blow all of this. I'm looking at you, John.
It's what would become known as the Angevin Empire, covering all of England and half of France.
And it's called Angevin because Henry starts out in Anjou, and that was how the Plantagenets referred to themselves. They didn't call themselves the Plantagenet dynasty. They will call themselves the Angevin dynasty. Plantagenet comes from Henry's father, Geoffrey. who wore like a sprig of like a broom plant. It was called Plantagenista. It's complicated, but and they were known for their red hair and fiery temper, things like that.
Eleanor had reshaped European politics, founded an empire, and she did it while pregnant most of the time. In fact, she was already pregnant with another son when she was crowned. Those 2 sons would be the first of 8 children born within 14 years, 5 sons and 3 daughters, 7 of which lived to adulthood. In other words, between age 30 and age 44, Eleanor was pretty much either constantly pregnant or in recovery. Meanwhile, she was also serving as regent while Henry was off trying to repair the damage wrought by the Civil War. Now, exactly how much power Eleanor wielded during this time is a matter of debate among historians.
So again, put yourself in the position of Louis, and in 15 years he has 2 daughters with this woman. He had all these hopes of having a son with her, of Aquitaine becoming a part of the French crown, and now not only has he seen her go, take her land with her, but now she marries into the English crown, has all these children with him in 14 years, and now Aquitaine is part of the English crown. It's just brutal.
Some think she was quite influential as regent of England and was governing Aquitaine directly, while others suggest that Henry's counselors boxed her in and she mostly served as a rubber stamp even in her own territory. But either way, it's interesting that Eleanor was on and off governing the kingdom during one of its most turbulent periods, as Henry crushed rebellions, reformed the English state, campaigned in Ireland, feuded with Louis, and had a tragic standoff with his friend Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, whose murder he accidentally ordered when 2 knights overheard him ranting about the man.
Long story that we could do a whole series of episodes on as well, but this goes back to what we've talked about before, where the church kind of has its own laws, its own legal system. It's kind of separate from the civil system, the secular system. And Henry wanted to change that. He wanted to get someone in as head of the church in England, which is the Archbishop of Canterbury, that would kind of be his guy. And Thomas Becket was like one of his best friends. He had been his chancellor. And so he thought, well, I'll put him in there. It'll be perfect. It'll be exactly what I want. I'll have a yes man in charge of the church. It'll give me control of the church. Everything will be great. But then he appoints Becket, and Becket takes the job seriously. He really kind of goes into it, and he backs up the whole idea of the church being separate, and just frustrates Henry to no end. And eventually there's an issue, and I think Henry is on campaign in France, and he hears about something that Becket did, and he says something to the effect of, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" And these knights, I think there were 3 of them, hear that as an order to go kill him, and they do. They kill him right on the floor of Canterbury Cathedral, and it's this huge deal, and it's really bad for Henry, and he has to go and do penance, and he lays on the floor for like a day or something, and builds a shrine to Thomas Becket, and he really effectively overcomes that by how he handles it. It's a politically brilliant action on Henry's part, how he follows up this, what could have been, complete just devastation to him.
On all of these consequential issues, Eleanor's voice and opinions are missing, though we do get brief glimpses of her and Henry's personal life, because not all was well in this union. First of all, some sources claim Eleanor clashed with Henry's power broker mother, Empress Matilda, and second, well, unlike the dull but faithful Louis, Henry was extremely active as a lover, including with other women, which he didn't hide. Again, sources and interpretations disagree. Some historians claim that she reacted with a detached worldliness and point out that she attended court events with Henry's mistresses. Others point to stories of epic screaming matches.
So again, why don't we know for sure? Because we have to question the sources. What are their motivations? Why are they writing? What are they writing to accomplish? How close to these events were they? Were they eyewitnesses? Are they in a position to have known? And we have to weigh all of this stuff. And so all we can do is say, well, this could be what happened, but it could have been this. And you then have to kind of form your own opinions.
Which would not be out of character for Henry, who was known for extreme rages. Tantrums he may have exaggerated for the purpose of political intimidation. Actually, in one famous episode, he became so furious, he threw himself on the floor and started chewing the carpet. Then, in 1168, for reasons unknown, Eleanor left Henry's court and transferred to Poitiers in Aquitaine, where she ran her duchy and set up an independent court. While some sources claim she was an innovator in the arts of courtly love, particularly her famous courts of love that ruled like a legal court on cases concerning matters of romance, that's likely a myth. However, her court was well known for its patronage of art and poetry, and may have inspired the broad strokes of later tales. We do know, however, that Eleanor was also spending a lot of time in Aquitaine with her favorite son, Richard. Because you see, Henry had a really bad habit. No, not the philandering, or the anger issues, or the semi-accidentally murdering the Archbishop of Canterbury. No, what I'm talking about is how controlling Henry was. He would never give up even the littlest bit of power. While Henry elevated his eldest living son, also named Henry, to a position of co-monarch, the young...
Yeah, they call him Henry the Young King because he never ruled on his own. He dies before his father, so he's not Henry III. Henry III will be a grandson of Henry II. Henry the Young King is known that way, and Richard that they're referring to is the future Richard the Lionheart.
Young king had no real power. And this wasn't even a royal apprenticeship, mind you. He just watched as his father did everything. The same was true of Richard, who he made Duke of Aquitaine, and Geoffrey, who got Brittany. His youngest son, John, basically got nothing, and had to live for years under the humiliating nickname John Lackland. But even if they had lands, their father still ran those estates as if they were his, and kept them on a tight financial leash. Also, to Eleanor's likely dismay, he consistently meddled in the affairs of Aquitaine. And in 1173, he finally pushed it too far.
Yep.
Hoping to give John something, the elder Henry took 3 castles from young Henry's territory and gave them to his youngest brother. The headstrong young Henry, only 18 years old, finally reached a breaking point.
So supposedly, it's believed that young John, the youngest, the baby of the family, was King Henry II's favorite. And that caused a lot of consternation between the brothers, and this whole division of land and all this stuff that's happening will lead to all these rebellions by these brothers against their father. It's like I said, pretty dysfunctional stuff.
He fled to Paris and raised a rebellion, sheltering in the court of Eleanor's ex Louis. And there, he gathered allies, including brothers Richard, then 16, and Geoffrey, then 15, supposedly encouraged by their mother.
Yep.
And when Henry called for Eleanor to send him troops, she did not. Her teenage sons were at war with her husband, and Eleanor had chosen sides.
Oh, this is such a good story. I cannot wait until we get to part 3. I guess it'll come out this Saturday. So hopefully we'll do it then. If not, then maybe Sunday or Monday. But let me know your thoughts. Use the comment section below. If you learned anything you didn't know before, let us know. If you want to add something to the story that maybe wasn't mentioned that you think is important for the rest of us, let's learn together. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.